The inherited obsession. In the middle of the 15th century, the city of Constantinople was an empire in name only. For over 1,000 years, it had been the magnificent capital of the Eastern Roman, Byzantine Empire, a bastion of Christendom that had withstood dozens of sieges from Arabs, Vikings, and Crusaders. Its legendary Theodosian walls, a triple line of fortifications stretching for miles, were considered the most formidable defensive system ever built. The city was the queen of cities, a repository of classical knowledge and holy relics. Its great golden dome of the Hagia Sophia, a beacon of a glorious past. But that glory was long faded. The once mighty empire had shrunk to little more than the city itself and a few scattered territories. Its population had dwindled from a peak of 500,000 to perhaps a mere 50,000, rattling around in a decaying city of ruins and overgrown fields. The great city was an island of history, a Christian Roman ghost surrounded by a vast and hungry sea. The Ottoman Empire died in 1451. The throne of that empire passed to a 19-year-old of astonishing intellect and ferocious ambition. Sultan Mehmed II was a true Renaissance prince, fluent in at least 6 languages, a student of history, science, and engineering, and a man obsessed with the campaigns of Alexander the Great. But above all, he harbored a single, all-consuming obsession, an ambition inherited from his father and every Ottoman sultan before him: the conquest of Constantinople. For the Ottomans, the city was more than a strategic prize. It was Kazil Elma, the red apple, the ultimate symbol of world dominion. Its capture was foretold in a hadith, a saying of the Prophet Muhammad himself: "Verily you shall conquer Constantinople. What a wonderful leader will her leader be, and what a wonderful army will that army be." Men did not just see the conquest as a political goal. He saw it as his sacred duty, his personal destiny. He would be that wonderful leader, and he would succeed where all others had failed. Throat cutter and the giant, unlike his predecessors, Mehmed was not a man of idle dreams. His ambition was matched by meticulous and innovative planning. He spent the first 2 years of his reign consolidating his power and preparing for the great siege, leaving the anxious Byzantines in a state of false security. His first move was a masterpiece of strategic audacity. On the European side of the Bosphorus Strait, just a few miles north of the city, he ordered the construction of a massive fortress. The Byzantines had an older, smaller fort on the Asian side, but Mehmed's new citadel would give him complete control of the narrow waterway. This would cut off Constantinople from any potential aid from the Genoese colonies on the Black Sea. The fortress, Rumeli Hizari, Fortress of Europe, was built in a staggering 4 months. Its cannons, menacingly aimed at the strait, earned it the grim nickname Bagakisen, the Strait Cutter, or more chillingly, the Throat Cutter. The city's lifeline was severed. While the fortress rose, Mehmed sought a technological key to unlock the city's ancient walls. He found it in a shadowy figure named Urban, a brilliant but mercenary Hungarian cannon founder. Urban had first offered his services to the Byzantine Emperor, Constantine XI, but the emperor's empty treasury could not meet his price. So Urban took his talents to the Sultan. Mehmed asked him a simple question: could he cast a cannon powerful enough to smash the legendary walls of Constantinople? Urban promised he could build a cannon that could blast the walls of Babylon itself. Mehmed gave him unlimited resources. At the foundry in the Ottoman capital of Edirne, Urban created a monster. The basilic was a super cannon of terrifying proportions, over 27 feet long, with walls of solid bronze 8 inches thick, capable of firing a 1,200-pound marble cannonball. Over a mile, it was a weapon of mass destruction for its age. Dozens of other large cannons were cast, but the basilic was the centerpiece. Transporting it was a monumental feat, requiring a crew of hundreds of men and teams of oxen to drag it over 150 miles to the siege lines. Mehmed now had the means to tear down the walls that had protected the city for a millennium, the last emperor. And the city of ghosts inside the walls, the mood was a grim mixture of fatalism, fervent prayer, and desperate hope. The last Roman emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, was a brave and noble leader, but he was the ruler of a ghost. He knew his situation was dire. He sent desperate pleas for help to the Christian kingdoms of the West, but his cries fell on largely deaf ears. The Pope offered aid, but only on the condition that the Orthodox Byzantines submit to the authority of the Catholic Church, move so unpopular in the city that one high-ranking official famously declared, "Better the Sultan's turban than the Cardinal's hat." Constantine's entire defending force numbered a mere 7,000 men, a pitiful number to man over 13 miles of fortifications. This tiny army was a mix of Byzantine soldiers, citizen militia, and a few hundred crucial foreign volunteers. Chief among them was the charismatic Genoese soldier of fortune, Giovanni Giustiniani Lungo, a specialist in defending walled cities, who arrived with 700 heavily armed professional soldiers. Constantine immediately placed him in command of the land walls. In early April of 1453, the people of Constantinople looked out from their ancient ramparts to a sight of unimaginable terror. A vast Ottoman army, estimated at over 80,000 elite troops, including the formidable Janissaries, stretched as far as the eye could see. A fleet of over 100 Ottoman ships blockaded the sea. And at the center of the land army, aimed like a dagger at the weakest section of the walls, was the monstrous form of Urban's great cannon. Mehmed sent a final offer of surrender. The emperor could leave with his treasures and people, and be granted a governorship in Greece. Constantine's reply was steeped in the tragic dignity of his office. "To surrender the city to you is not for me to decide or for anyone else of its citizens. We shall all of our own free will die, and we shall not begrudge our lives." The lines were drawn. The greatest siege of the age was about to begin. The thunder of Urban. April 6, 1453, the siege began. A hush fell over the Ottoman camp as a single order was given. Then came a flash, a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of the earth, and a cloud of acrid smoke. The basilic Urban super cannon had spoken for the first time. Its massive stone ball screamed through the air and slammed into the ancient walls near the St. Romanus Gate, blasting a huge section of the outer rampart to rubble. The psychological shock was immense. The defenders had never experienced anything like it. For 1,000 years, their walls had been their ultimate security. Now they could be pulverized from a mile away. The rhythm of the siege was soon established. The great cannon could only be fired a few times a day due to the immense heat it generated and the time it took to reload, but its every shot was an event. Its impact was supplemented by dozens of other large cannons in Mehmed's siege train, which kept up a relentless 24-hour-a-day bombardment. Under the brilliant and tireless direction of the Genoese expert, Giustiniani, the defenders worked miracles. As soon as a section of the wall was breached, men, women, and even children would rush to the gap under a hail of arrows and musket balls. They would frantically build a makeshift stockade of earth, rubble, and barrels filled with stones. By night, they repaired what they could, their efforts a desperate, heroic race against the dawn, when the thunder would begin anew. For weeks this brutal stalemate held. The Ottomans could batter the walls, but they could not break the spirit of the men defending them. Every infantry assault launched at the breaches was repulsed in a storm of Greek fire, arrows, and bloody hand-to-hand combat. The chain and the unthinkable journey while the land walls held. The city's sea defenses proved equally formidable. The entrance to the city's natural harbor, the Golden Horn, was protected by a massive, unbreakable iron chain stretched across its mouth, supported by wooden booms. Behind this chain, the small but effective fleet of Byzantine and Italian ships was safe, preventing the Ottoman navy from attacking the weaker sea walls within the harbor. Mehmed knew he had to get his ships into the Golden Horn. His first naval assaults on the Great Chain were repulsed with heavy losses. Frustrated, his mind, steeped in the tales of ancient conquerors, conceived of a plan so audacious, so logistically impossible, that no one on the defending side could have ever anticipated it. If he could not sail his fleet into the harbor, he would drag it over a mountain. He ordered the construction of a massive roadway of greased logs, stretching for over a mile up the steep hill behind the Genoese colony of Pura and down the other side into the waters of the Golden Horn. On the night of April 22nd, under cover of darkness and a diversionary bombardment, a feat of Herculean engineering and willpower took place. Tens of thousands of men and oxen, their shouts and creaks masked by the cannon fire, began to haul some 70 Ottoman ships out of the Bosphorus, up the steep, greased track, and down into the harbor. The next morning, the defenders of Constantinople awoke to a sight that shattered their morale. An entire enemy fleet now sat in their supposedly secure harbor, its sails unfurled as if it had been placed there by a divine hand. The psychological blow was as devastating as any cannonball. The defenders now had to stretch their already thin numbers to man the sea walls, and their small fleet was trapped. Mehmed's mad gamble had paid off spectacularly. The city of omens, as the weeks of siege ground on into May, the city began to starve. Hope dwindled, replaced by an atmosphere of apocalyptic dread. The besieged city, steeped in mysticism and prophecy, began to see bad omens everywhere. A strange, creeping fog, unheard of in late spring, blanketed the city for days. When it lifted, the people witnessed a terrifying lunar eclipse, which they interpreted as a fulfillment of an ancient prophecy that the city would fall when the moon was dark. A few days later, during a religious procession, one of the most sacred icons of the Virgin Mary, the city's protector, slipped from its platform and fell to the ground. It was another devastating sign. The final, most terrifying omen came on the night of May 26th. A strange, inexplicable light was seen flickering around the golden dome of the Hagia Sophia, the heart of Orthodox Christendom. Some saw it as the Holy Spirit finally abandoning the city to its fate. Inside the Sultan's camp, Mehmed's own army was growing restless. The massive casualties from the failed assaults and the seemingly unbreakable spirit of the defenders were beginning to sap their morale. Mehmed's viziers urged him to abandon the costly siege. But the Sultan's will was iron. He knew the city was on the verge of collapse. He decided to stake everything on one final, massive, all-out assault. He declared a day of rest and prayer, promising his troops the plunder of the city for 3 days. All the wealth, the treasures, the men, the women, the children. Fired by religious zeal and the promise of unimaginable riches, the Ottoman army prepared for the end, the final assault and the fall of an empire in the final hours before the assault. Inside the walls, a scene of haunting unity took place. The long and bitter schism between the Orthodox Byzantines and the Catholic Italians was set aside. In the magnificent candlelit interior of the Hagia Sophia, Emperor Constantine XI, his Genoese and Venetian allies, and the people of the city gathered for one last Christian service. Orthodox priests and a Catholic cardinal shared the Eucharist. For one final night, they were not Greeks or Latins. They were simply Christians, Romans, defending the last remnant of their 1,000-year-old empire. After the service, the emperor rode to the walls to take his final stand with his soldiers. Just after 1 a.m. on the morning of Tuesday, May 29, 1453, the attack began. The roar of cannons, drums, and trumpets was deafening as the first wave of irregular troops, the Bashi Bazouks, were sent forward as cannon fodder to exhaust the defenders. They were cut down in their thousands but served their purpose. The second wave, the better-equipped Anatolian troops, followed, keeping up the pressure. For hours, the exhausted defenders held the line, Then Mehmed played his trump card. He unleashed his elite, the Janissaries. These disciplined, formidable warriors, marching in perfect order through the chaos, advanced on the weakest section of the wall. At this crucial moment, disaster struck the defenders. A cannonball fragment mortally wounded their brilliant commander, Giovanni Giustiniani. His men, seeing him carried away from the battle, panicked. At the same time, a small group of Janissaries discovered that a small, secondary gate, the Kirka Porta, had been left unbolted. They poured through, raising the Ottoman standard on top of the inner wall. Suddenly the cry went up, "The city is taken." The defense collapsed. Emperor Constantine XI, seeing that all was lost, tore off his imperial regalia, keeping only his sword. He was last seen plunging into the oncoming wave of Janissaries, fighting and dying as the last Roman emperor. The Ottoman tide poured into the city. The 3 days of plunder began. The great city, the queen of cities, the last vestige of the Roman Empire, had fallen. That afternoon, Sultan Mehmed II, now fat as Sultan Mehmed, the Conqueror, rode his white horse through the city streets to the Hagia Sophia. He dismounted, entered the great church, and after stooping to pour a handful of dust over his turban, in a gesture of humility before God, he declared that the magnificent cathedral would now be a mosque. A new age had begun. The fall of Constantinople was not just the end of a city. It was the end of an era, a seismic event that marked the true end of the Middle Ages and sent a shockwave of fear and change across the entire Western world.